How We Make Movies is brought to you by Microsoft Surface, Assimilate, Azo and AJA, Moviola, and Canon Hollywood. Hello and welcome back to How We Make Movies. I'm your host, Amanda Lippert, and each episode we sit down with awesome filmmakers who share their stories, inspire us to keep us going, and tell us all the secrets behind their success. And failures, but success too. We like success. Our guests today are killing it. They are writer Dan Schoffler and producer Josh Shader, and they're going to tell us all about the behind-the-scenes action on the brand new Starz show, The Chair. The show documents the making of two feature films by two competing directors using the same script. Directors Shane Dawson and Anna Martemucci each received funding and had 20 days to complete their features. And the films premiered recently in September, and The Chair is now streaming on Starz and Starz Play. So let's give a warm welcome to Dan and Josh. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to get started, tell us how you guys met and how The Chair kind of came about and your involvement in it.
Sure. I mean, we met. I'm Josh, by the way.
Yeah, this is Josh and Dan. We'll have little things.
So I met Dan as a producer, sort of the way I meet a lot of writers, which is basically I read a spec script of his, and I liked his voice, and we sat down and talked about something to develop to work on together. And at first, we were looking for the sort of the quintessential high concept, big Hollywood idea that we could go sell, and nothing felt right, nothing felt real. And we stumbled upon a concept that Dan sort of kept coming back to, that I'll let Dan pitch in a second, but that just felt more real and relatable. And I said to him at the time, I said, you know, if it feels right to you, we should go for it. I said, but it's a really sort of small bullseye. And eventually he wrote the script, and we were lucky enough that it was good enough that it got him representation and eventually sold to MTV. And then when MTV didn't want to make it, we were able to get it out of there and turn around. And it was around that time that Chris Moore, who's the creator of The Chair, who's a producer on American Pie and Good Will Hunting and Project Greenlight, had this idea for this crazy show, which is basically what would happen if you gave two different directors the same script. And he was looking for a script that could be made and taken in two really different directions. Mm-hmm. And thankfully this was a script that could be interpreted in that way. And you know, he came to both of us and said, you know, how do you feel about getting your movie made twice? Which is a pretty weird experience. So that was sort of the beginning of The Chair. And we were, you know, it was Chris with this idea, and then ultimately we were the first two people to sort of join the group. So
it got sold twice and it got made twice. That's pretty rare, especially for a first feature.
Yeah, it was a pretty odd experience. I mean, Josh really covered the whole origin story of how we met, but it was pretty lucky, I guess. I was a 25-year-old screenwriter, and it's like 6 years ago, and like many other writers, I'm sure a lot of people out there are writers, and I had a couple scripts that were okay and some TV specs, and I was kind of just sending them around to like anybody I could like get to read them, or like flying query letters, and Josh kind of answered one day, and it kind of went from there, which is a strange and not a likely place that a lot of people get, but I was lucky enough that it worked out. And as Josh said, this is an idea that it just kind of hit me. I had was talking to a friend whose parents were moving from their hometown, and he mentioned that, like, yeah, it's going to suck for, you know, they're going to college, Thanksgiving break, he's not going to be able to go home. And I was like, there's something there. And I just liked the idea, and I liked that it had this innate time frame of, you know, characters come home on a Wednesday and they go back to school on a Sunday. It just kind of, all the pieces were there, and I worked with Josh on it for a full year before we showed it to anybody. I mean, again, I was
very hard on him.
I was a 25-year-old screenwriter, and he had experience.
I was like 26. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
He had experience, and I was just in a place where I needed to get my scripts out there. I needed somebody to open a door, and Josh was, you know, thankfully he did that for me, so it was great.
The doorman.
The doorman. He opened the door.
Josh is the doorman.
And I left him behind.
Yes, Josh,
exactly.
The doorman.
I'll take it.
Now, Josh, you were the producer on both of the films, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I was. I mean, it was a weird thing because, you know, obviously I developed the script, so, you know, ultimately when Chris came to me about him wanting to make it a part of The Chair, he sort of said to me, how do you want to do this? You know, do you want to be on both movies, or do you just want to step back and maybe be involved in producing the show? And you know, I said, look, I definitely want to be involved in producing the show. I mean, part of it, selfishly, was if I was going to put myself on camera, I wanted to have a little role producing it behind camera. But then I was like, I couldn't imagine letting it go completely, and particularly then sitting back and watching it get made without me. So I was definitely I definitely wanted to see it through and be a part of it. But logistically, obviously, it's impossible. We overlapped for a couple weeks, and so it would have been logistically impossible for me to be the only producer on both films. And so each director had their own personal producer that they brought in. In one case, it was a team. So I had great producing partners on both movies. So by no means did I do it by myself. I had a lot of help, and we all sort of, as you do in any movie, you sort of found your role. So my role on Shane Dawson's movie Not Cool was different than my role on Anna Martemucci's movie Holidaysburg. And what was really strange for me was to see the script get developed in these two different directions, because that was really what happened was we wanted to create a situation where the directors could make the movie their own. I mean, that's a lot of people have said to us, like, well, why didn't you just make them direct the script? It's like, well, that's not real. I mean, that doesn't, directors get to come on and put their stamp on it. And so, we wanted them to be able to make it their own. And the first step was they each had to work with Dan. I mean, Dan's in the WGA, and the WGA requires that the first writer on gets to do a rewrite. So he did a rewrite for both directors. And it was interesting because the original material was, I would say, sort of very John Hughes in tone, in that it had a lot of heart, but it had humor, and it had broader humor to it, in the same way that 16 Candles and Breakfast Club and movies like that are, especially when you look back on them now, they're almost a little cornier and cheesier than you, I think, remember at the time. But it had sort of that John Hughes tone, and Shane took it in a much more, raunchier, R-rated, as he...
National Lampoon-y.
It's National Lampoon-y, sort of, a lot of big gags.
When I watched it, I thought this is kind of like a Disney TV show on crack. Like, it was just the R-rated.
There's crack.
And it looks bright. It's got a lot of gags.
It's fun, we had the premiere this past week, and it's a fun movie to watch with an audience, because the jokes just keep coming. It moves really fast. And then Anna sort of went the other tonal direction, and hers is much more grounded in reality and very real, and the characters feel really real.
Hers to me felt more like Garden State, or like a typical indie film that was like, very real.
I mean, it's that like American Pie or Garden State. I think that's the way they go, and it's interesting because the script sort of sits in the middle.
Yeah, there were elements of both of the, like, there were some big laughs in the script, and there was a lot of heart and a couple serious moments, and those two directors, their personalities honed in on those elements and
took a totally different direction. Now, how hard was it for you as the writer to do rewrites for someone that just wanted to make the movie, but do you feel like they cared about the movie? And
it was hard, and I know it was a learning process, because I think at the beginning, I wanted my vision to be there. I wanted in the final movie, and I wanted them to make that movie, and they didn't want to make the original script. They wanted to do their version of the script, and so I was working, for them to fulfill their vision, which is strange coming off a script that I spent, 5 years developing with Josh.
Yeah.
But ultimately, movies are a director's medium.
Yeah, once the director comes on board, it's their movie.
Yeah.
It's very rare for, that's more television, that the writer can trump the director. And I think you were talking about, why didn't they just come on and direct that? If it was about TV, that's what happens in TV, but not in film.
Right.
Now, do you feel that either of the directors matched your voice more closely, or did they both really go in different directions?
They went in different directions. There's elements in both that kind of match them. I think if you were to read the original script and then see both movies, you would probably say Anna's was closer, because mine didn't have gags. Mine didn't have any moments that were so broad that would take you out of the movie. It was based in reality, as is Anna's, and Shane's is based in kind of a hyper-exaggerated reality. So, so it's a little different.
Yeah. Now, before you said that you sold it twice, you sold it to MTV and then it got sold again. How does that work? Normally, I've heard if you option a film and then it doesn't get sold to someone else, it gets shelved, and there are people that have lost the rights to their film and never got to make
We were lucky.
No, ultimately, if any studio or corporation is willing to sort of give it back to you, it's a blessing. I think that, I appreciate that they were willing to do that to us, and ultimately, it's a very sort of simple legal deal where we owe them all the money, or anyone rather who's going to make the movie essentially owes them all the money that they put into it, plus whatever interest that's sort of accumulated. But yeah, no, we were I think for them it was, part of it was they felt bad because when they originally bought it, it was I think like January or February, and they were like, we're going to be in production on this in the
They
spring.
were really bullish on it.
Yeah, I mean, and then just there were actually things that happened internally there, you know, that had less to do with us and more to do with what was going on and what they were going to make in the future. That sort of by the time we turned in that first rewrite, they're like, yeah, we're not really doing this anymore.
And I think a lot of times,
disappointing.
like when you say that people can't get the rights back, you know, with studios, if they're buying a property and they don't want to give it away because they don't want to have egg on their face, that, like,
Right.
we didn't make this, and
Absolutely.
now, you know, they make it and they make $1 billion. In this case, it was a small movie, and they kind of recognized that, and they would be real dicks if they didn't give it. There was no reason to not give it back. So.
Although I wonder, by the way, I wonder.
I'm sure they had a discussion. Where,
No,
like,
but I wonder if any. I mean, I sit here right now wondering if any of like the execs that we worked with have seen the show or have seen the movies and made the connection.
We could have made millions.
So.
Now, who owns?
By the way, you're just assuming that we're making. This is still independent film we're talking about here. So,
It's true. It's true. Now, is this show itself, is it owned by Starz, or is
No.
that independent?
No, and that's what's interesting about the chair, because the chair is the whole thing is an independent operation, right? I mean, Chris Moore put together this, you know, it really is this like almost like this mini studio where we're making a television series and simultaneously making 2 movies, and all of the money was raised independently. And you know, it was a combination of equity financing, and there was you know, the Pennsylvania state tax credit. We had a county grant, and then ultimately Starz was involved in licensing the show, and that sort of helped bring in financing as well to finish the whole project. And the money was an issue, and for anyone who's watching the show now or is going to watch the show, like, we're really honest about it. You know, we got to Pittsburgh and all the money wasn't in the bank. And so not only for the movies, but for the show. And so there were people that were worried, you know, am I gonna get a paycheck at the end of this week? And there were weeks that went by that people didn't. And, you know, it was a challenge. And so, you know, it very much is, the chair in of itself is an indie about indies.
Yeah, people
which
are
is kind of
surprised when
cool.
they see that, when they watch Starz, and like, why is, if the first 5 episodes, money is a big factor. People are, why are they talking about money?
Yeah.
This is a TV show. Don't they have the money? And no, it was an independent.
No, Starz wasn't
documentary
officially on board at that
shooting
point, yeah.
2 movies.
Wow. Now, is that typical of TV, or is that a new trend?
I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a new trend, but I mean, it's definitely not typical. I mean, it's nice to not have cash flow issues, but I mean, I think that in a weird way, it kind of made us. We were all in the trenches together.
Yeah.
There was no, you know, I mean, the 2 movies and the show, and everyone was sort of, we were all in it together. And what was kind of neat was the dot crew, you know, sort of was on the same level as the crew shooting the movie, because they're like, hey, look, I didn't get paid this week either, you know. And it's like, it was a bonding experience in that way. I don't think anyone, you know, if we're lucky enough to get to do it again, I don't think we want to go through that same experience. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think in order to get it done, that's what it took. And you know, we really credit and thank, you know, the guys at Starz and Chris Albrecht, who's in charge of Starz, for believing in this, because that was the other funny thing, which is, they'd never done an unscripted series before. And so the first thing they said to us, you know, we're in Pittsburgh shooting the series and making the movies, and they said, well, can you give us the episode synopsises for all 10 episodes? And we're like, it's a documentary. We're shooting it right now. I have no idea what's gonna happen, you know? And so they really took a leap of faith, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, and so, you know, Chris really credits, and I really credit Chris Albrecht and Carmi Zlotnick and the guys at Starz for taking a leap on us, and ultimately for letting the show be what it was, letting the experience, you know, we didn't, you know, we say all the time, like, it really wasn't a manipulation. This isn't a reality show in the sense of what reality shows have become. You know, reality shows sort of have become this new thing. This was a
Yeah.
documentary.
That's a really good point, because when I was watching it, it did feel very authentic. Do you guys want to see some clips from it? Because we have a trailer for the show here. Let's watch the clips from it.
I know, that's exactly how I feel right now. Lost, confused.
I'm scared someone's gonna just walk up to me and be like, you don't deserve it. You're out.
The chair is 2 directors shooting a movie from the same source material. What if you could really show that to people? How 2 different directors would take the same material and turn it into 2 separate movies.
Ideally, they'll be different from one another and explore that in a really cool way. My name is Shane Dawson.
My name is Anna Martemucci.
I've been wanting to make movies my whole life.
Shane Dawson has a real sense of his generation. I believe that he could direct a movie.
Because of my YouTube channel, a lot of people think that I wear wigs and do voices all the time. Yeah! The whole YouTube thing is almost a character. The real Shane is not confident at all.
I had always been a writer. I went to NYU for screenwriting.
Anna Martemucci has come up through a very traditional way. She's an actress, she's a writer. She and her family have all come through the New York independent film community.
And action!
I know nothing about her movie. I'm not trying to make a hard C movie. I definitely wanted to go raw teen comedy.
Hi, great.
For me, the point is to show the process of what these directors go through.
I think the thing that's overwhelming about making a movie is just how large a task it is. Once I start actually doing the job of directing, I know what I want and how to best tell the story.
I just think she has a real problem with story, and she's a director, and the director has to tell the story.
It just feels like such a cruel joke when all your dreams come true, and then you just feel like you're gonna puke the entire time.
Being a first-time director is crazy. And now everything that you're doing is being documented. Every choice that you're making is being chronicled.
I am 13 hours from the first day of shooting for the movie.
It just feels like a big adventure that I am not prepared for, and then I freak out.
Fuck! Cut! Cut! Come on!
A lot of other things are gonna have to be snowy if this is snowy.
I think this movie's gonna be good if I just don't fuck up on week 2, 3, and 4.
It's never designed to be this grand experiment where I'm gonna put 2 people who can't do it, and we're just gonna create 2 fucking train wrecks.
Why are all these people here?
What the fuck are you doing? What's going on?
But that's not real.
I've been waiting to do this my whole life, and I'm ready.
And action.
No, dude, you had Final Cut. You can do whatever you want. So when they come see the movie and they think it's dog shit, they're gonna ask you, why is it dog shit?
So you guys had a really interesting strategy with the marketing of the show. You released the movies first, and then just now it started streaming on Starz. Why did you choose to release the movies first?
The show actually started 2 weeks before the movies.
Yeah.
They built
Oh,
up.
it did.
Yeah, but the basic
same idea, yeah.
I mean, the general premise was when you buy a DVD, do you watch the movies first or the behind the scenes first? And you know, ultimately, I don't know anyone who watches the behind the scenes first. Most people watch the movie, and so we wanted to have the movies come out early in the process, and also we just felt like to make people sit through 10 weeks of television just to get to a movie. It's like someone may want to, you know, the way people watch things and consume content now is so different than it was certainly when Project Greenlight was on, however many years ago, and we just thought that it just felt more relevant to just allow people, if someone wants to watch 5 episodes, then click over and check out the movie, and then come finish the series, they can do it like that. So
I also think a lot of people, like, when they watch TV, they have their phone out, they have their iPad out, and so they're watching, and they're like, oh, what is that movie? They're going to look up what that movie is, and if that movie's not available, that would be frustrating, and they wouldn't be able to watch it, so it's just let them click, let them pay more, and let them, you know, go for it right then.
I also wonder, because you're not making it the prize at the end of the show that the, you know, loyal viewers get to, you know, get that gratitude or gratification from, you're bringing fans of the movies to the show, so it's kind of funneling them in.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, that would be great, right? If people who didn't, you know, that's sort of what we always said too, right? It's like people who didn't know anything about the show and discover the movies and then realize there's a show and go, you know, and hopefully it goes both ways. And I mean, the whole thing, you know, is all one venture, right? We set out to make the show in these 2 movies, and everybody who invested in it, there's one sort of pool, and so that would, you know, everyone's, you know, one success is everyone's success. So there's definitely a strategy to that, and wanting to sort of help everybody, you know, all 3 aspects of the chair do well. But it's also what's interesting that I'm just watching that clip and realizing one of the things that we didn't talk about that I think is really an important element of this, because what the chair, you know, is about more than just this gimmick, right, of giving these 2 directors. It was also really about supporting independent film, because not only did these 2 directors get to direct their own movies and were given a nice budget to do so, but they were given Final Cut. And I think that's a really cool thing, and I think that only is something that could exist if we had done the whole thing independently. If we had partnered with a studio, there's no fucking way they would have given these directors Final Cut. And, you know, I think that's just cool. I think it's cool that, you know, Chris has that great line there of, you know, if your movie's dog shit, they're going to blame you for it. But at the end of the day, like, I think that's what any director wants, and particularly a first-time director. It's like, you know, let me make my mistakes. Let me, you know, be responsible for my successes. And I think the experiment of the chair was a success in that both directors made movies that they're really proud of. You know, today is actually the day. It's the day that the movies came out on iTunes and Amazon and Google Play, and so today's sort of the first day that consumers can decide. You know, if you're one of those people who thinks that success is dictated by, you know, how many tickets you sell or downloads you sell, or what the reviews are coming out now. So some people judge success by that. But I think the sort of the first determining factor of success is, did the filmmaker like the movie they made? You know, and that doesn't happen in studio movies. I mean, a lot of studio movies I've been involved in, the filmmakers, whether it's the writer or the producers, the director, are like, I don't even like what I made. You know, because they either blame the studio or the director blames the actors, but I think it begins with the director. And so I think if the director likes the product, then I think you've already succeeded right there. And I think that did happen on both these movies.
Yeah, I remember when Blade Runner came out, the director's cut came out 10 years later, what a bigger success it was because the director had finally his final cut, and that was such a big deal. Now, both the films are very contrasting in tone, and I'm sure they'll draw very different audiences. What kind of audience do you want to watch the show? Or what audience do you feel is right for the show?
Well, I think the audience that we're definitely going to get for the show is Shane Dawson fans. I think there's going to be a lot of those. He's got a ton of followers, but I hope that we find, you know, people who love film, people who like the original Project Greenlight, people who like behind the scenes, and I think I really hope it catches on inside the film community, because it's a really fascinating look at how you can make a movie on a tight budget in a city that's not LA, and it takes you from the beginning, you know, from pre-production, from rewriting the script with the writer, myself, all the way through the end, and you don't see that. There's nothing else out there like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's another element too that is different than certainly other behind-the-scenes things, and you saw it a little bit in that trailer, which is both Anna and Shane were really brave in the level of intimacy that they were sort of willing to let us into, and they all, you know, you saw the vlogs that they did. You know, they did a lot of these sort of personal video diaries, and that sort of level of insight to get in their heads, because you could see them on set. You know, we'll shoot the behind the scenes stuff, but then we were with them at night, you know, sitting in their closet being like, I can't believe I did that, and I was so scared, and I made that choice. And I think getting to see that is a whole other sort of psychological level that I haven't seen in a television show that's sort of a classic sort of behind the scenes of anything.
And even like those video blogs had two different tones to them, because they're really directing themselves in a way. And Shane is kind of used to putting himself on camera, and he's, all right, I'm going to make a little video about myself at the end of the day. And he had like a little point of view, and he was doing a little, sometimes they would almost be like sketches in a way. Yeah. And he would be prepared, he would have a bit, he would do a thing. And it's still, you know, it's still a peek into Shane, because that's the way he thinks. And Anna was very different. It was, you know, when she sat down, it was just like a confessional.
Yeah, she said something in the beginning. She said, I made a promise to myself to be honest with the camera, you know? And I think, and she is, and I definitely, you know, credit her for being brave in that way. I mean, she definitely exposes herself, you know, in this show. And I think it's neat for people to watch. And I think Shane
does too, though. Yeah. Right? Like, he's not used to exposing himself, even though he's totally used to exposing himself.
Right.
And like, I think there were moments where you really catch him, and it's fascinating to see.
Well, but I think the lesson, right, at the end of the day is we all judge directors by the final product, right? Yes. You go see the movie, and all you see, but you're just seeing the best takes, you know, and even some of those takes were ones that then got reshot, or ones that got tweaked in the editing room. And it's like, you're seeing the best, you know, but when you do something like this, and when you see, you know, when you allow yourself to be documented making a movie, you're showing like how messy the process can be. Yeah. And that's, I think, good to show people, because it's like, you don't need to get it right on every take, you know, and you don't need to be perfect as a director every day. You don't need to be perfect as an actor in every moment, you know. It's like, you just got, and that's sort of what you're doing. You're sort of hunting, and, you know, for those little perfect moments throughout the day, and then those all get strung together into your 90-minute or 120-minute, or hopefully less than that, movie. So
sometimes 3 hours.
Sometimes
it depends on the director. Now, this is a competition show, though.
Yes.
What are they competing for? What's the grand prize?
The winning director gets $250,000.
So just about enough to make another independent film if they wanted to.
A lot of things they can do with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
pay the rent.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people. The next follow-up question, not to ask it for you, but I think it's that I'm sure people are wondering is, how do you decide who won?
Yeah.
And this is something that, you know, initially everyone assumed that it was just going to be this like popular vote, like, you know, click A for Anna, click B for Shane.
And Shane comes with a built-in audience. He's a YouTube star. He's got millions of followers, so he seems like he'd be the obvious winner, and yeah, how do you keep it fair?
Well, but even if he wasn't, I don't think that's what I don't think we want people to watch 10 episodes and 2 movies and then make a decision based on someone's personality. It shouldn't be a popularity contest.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, what we want them to do is watch both movies and take a survey about what they thought about each movie. Not a horse race, not a this movie better, that movie better, but actual individual surveys, one about each movie. And what we're actually saying to people is you have to watch both if you want your surveys to count. And I think it's like who goes to like a pie eating contest and says, I just ate one piece of pie, that's the best one. It's like you would call that person, it's like that's not fair. You don't get to judge that. Try the fucking pumpkin pie, And so it's like, so I think but I mean that's something that we're gonna say to people out there because it's already starting there. People. It's interesting with taste, right? And particularly when you got these 2 very different films, there are people who are so, adamant that one of these films is their favorite and they love it and they hate the other one. And it happens on both sides. People are really opinionated, and it's like, I just think it's interesting that we're going to say to these people, okay, you care that much, and you really want to go take this survey that makes this person the winner. Well, guess what? You got to watch the other movie too. And I think it'll be interesting because what we're hoping it does is in taking the surveys and asking questions about. It's the typical sort of survey that you would take, when you go to a movie test screening. Questions like, would you recommend this to a friend? And, what did you think of the comedy? What did you think of the, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what we're hoping it does is forces audiences to ask themselves, what do they value in a movie? What's important to you in a movie? Is the cinematography important to you in a comedy? It's like these.
I also think it's important. You're saying it's not just the popularity contest of you click, but could have been another version where Chris Moore got together a jury of esteemed Hollywood types, and they determined who the winner was. And I don't think that would be necessarily fair either. I think the public should be the people who vote for this one.
Do box office sales have any? Is that criteria at all? No. Now, what about publicity? I mean, we talked about Shane already has a built-in audience, much more than Anna. And do they have their own publicists? And are those provided by the show, or are they responsible for their own? And how are you kind of keeping that horse race from getting out of hand?
Well, I mean, ultimately, each movie does have their own publicist. I mean, going back to distribution, when we finished the movies, we knew they were always going to be on Starz eventually. But it was the process of like finishing any indie movie. I mean, the first thing I started doing is calling indie distribution companies, and we had this added little thing of being like, hey guys, like not only is this low budget indie movie that doesn't have any famous people in it and is by a first time director, those are all things that are turnoffs to any indie distribution company. But what we said was, well, there's also this show that's going to market it for 10 weeks, so maybe that'll make you a little bit more interested. Some were, some weren't. And there were a few companies that want to distribute the movies, but we also said to them, you don't have to take both. You can take one, and we'll sell the other one to another company, And so we were willing to sort of explore that in distribution. It did end up that they ended up with both the same company, but we do try to sort of build a little bit of a Chinese wall, and there's different executives that work on each film and different PR people that work on each film, because there doesn't have to be, there can't be this sort of like mandate of equality and everything, because when you go out and promote something, like you go to these media outlets and some people say, I only want to talk to that person, I don't want to talk to that person. So you have to allow things to happen as they would happen organically in the world.
Do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday Shane was on, did a AMA for Reddit. And, I remember immediately seeing the second he was on, someone on social media goes, where's Anna's AMA? And it's like, I would love for Anna to do, an AMA Reddit. I mean, I'm the homer here, guys. I mean, I really like both movies. And yeah, you can say it's because I worked on both, but my taste for movies are really broad, and I think both of them made good movies. And I hope people see both movies, and so I didn't ever, choose sides in that way. I actually think both movie directors did a great job, and so I would love to see if Shane gets a publicity opportunity that Anna doesn't get. Like, I would love for her to get that opportunity. So I think that sort of more speaks to the challenge that any sort of independent filmmakers now have, which is, how do you tell people about your movie? How do you make them aware? And for someone like Shane, who has 2 million Twitter followers, like, it's a lot easier than for someone like Anna, who has 2,000. So.
So it's true that the filmmakers, have very different tastes, and it makes sense that the audiences would be at war with each other. Did Chris Moore choose these filmmakers because it would make good reality TV, or was it just based on merit and that he thought that they would be good filmmakers?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think, as he says in the trailer, he didn't set out to pick two directors who he thought would turn in train wrecks of movies that were dog shit.
Right.
He genuinely believed in both these directors, and he had been working with both Shane and Anna on some other projects beforehand, and he believed in them. But that being said, he knew that they were two interesting personalities, and he knew that that they would pop on TV, and I think they both do in their own way. So.
How were the filmmakers chosen?
Chris chose them.
Yeah.
No one else is responsible but Chris.
So
And it was interesting.
Yeah.
It was interesting for me because, Dan and I were the second and third people on the project after Chris, and the next step then was Chris saying these are the directors that I want to bring on, and I gave them the script, and they both want to get involved in it, and that isn't typical for a producer to not be involved in picking the director, because as Dan says, typically you'd meet with somebody, and we did. There were some really good directors, that wanted to direct the movie when we had no financing, and we met with guys who said things like, this is the story I want to tell, and like as a producer, like that's the kind of person that you would connect with. Obviously, you hope that you like their work, but it's like you pick a director who connects with the material as it is right now, and these two, I don't think did. And I think they connected more to the opportunity to make a movie, and I totally get that, and I don't discredit them for that at all. They were able to take the script and find a way to tell their own stories out of it. So that's sort of what Dan said before, which is that they wanted to sort of make their own version of it and put their own stamp on it, which I totally get them doing. I think that makes sense.
And to be fair, we were not involved with the choosing, but I could have not allowed. I technically hadn't sold the script to Chris then at that point before the directors were on board. I could have said,
"Oh yeah,
no,"
true.
But I could have said no. I don't. I'm going to hold out for the integrity of my movie. I'm not going to let these directors make the movie. But it's so hard. As a writer, I had sold some things, but I hadn't got anything made. To get something made, and here I was given this opportunity to get a movie made twice. And to be involved with both directors, and I got to be involved. I got to try to get them to put as much as my script, and I went for it. And
it's funny. I was looking at one of the episodes. I think it's 106 when Dan's on set, and this is the first time he's ever been on set before. And it's like learning. We document this in the show, like learning as a writer. How do you give a note to a director? You're sitting there watching, and you're like, this isn't the way the scene was written, and like learning to sort of to deal with that. And I think that's a level of intimacy that the show gets into that is really cool. I mean, and in terms of sort of navigating just that that is
Spoiler
difficult.
alert, it's really hard being a writer on set.
Spoiler alert, it was hard. It's hard being a writer, but it's hard. But it's hard being a director. I mean, in that same scene, and it's
a tough scene.
I say scene, but it's
I'm
like
talking about the actual scene, not the scene of the film.
Right. I'm talking about the scene of the documentary. But I mean, in that same scene, the director's talking about it's hard to be a director when there's this gaggle of producers and writers talking behind your back at Video Village.
They know best.
Right, and so it's that that learning that set behavior and etiquette and learning how to communicate with the other filmmakers.
And you guys were all new, so you were all learning together.
Yeah, the first-time directors.
Do you think you'll ever direct after this experience and having?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm dying to
having
direct
so
my
much
work.
attachment to your work and
Yeah.
having taken away from you, like you want to direct it eventually.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's very cool. Now, what were the budgets for the films, and what were some of the challenges in dealing with, low budgets?
Well, I mean, both
You
movies.
say the official numbers.
Sure. I mean, both movies ended up being around $900,000. I mean, it's a little confusing, even in the show, and it was like started confusing us when we talk about it. But each director had $600,000 that was what we refer to as their discretionary budget. There was things in the budget that were outside of that paying the writer, for instance. Like they didn't have any, that was mandated by the WGA. It's like there were certain things that they didn't have control over, but it was about $600,000 that they had control over. And but the total budgets ended up being in the $900,000 range. Some of that got dictated by, like it does in most independent film, by SAG agreements, right? And so we were trying to stay under the SAG modified low budget agreement. And then there's a diversity incentive that you can tap into, which is basically if you cast people, a diverse cast of women and different ethnicities, then the SAG allows you to bump that number up to like $937,000. So that was sort of the number we were working with. We had to stay under that, and then that sort of that right there presented a challenge because not only did we want to get that incentive, but both directors were like didn't want to make the white movie. They wanted their cast to be diverse, but we were shooting in Pittsburgh, and it's not a particularly diverse town.
It's a very white city.
It's a very white city, and lovely city. But
you'd be surprised.
And that was a challenge right there, you know. And so, you know, if we were in New York and LA, I think there's a little bit of more of a diverse.
We ended up having to cast a lot of college students out of Carnegie Mellon to fit the diversity.
What were some of your biggest casting challenges?
Black penis, is that the?
I mean, there's one.
Shane wanted a shot of.
There's an actor. I mean, let's go back to where it started. He cast an actor who's really funny to play a role, who's an African American gentleman, and part of the gag later was that this character showed his penis. The actor did not want to do it. We had no problem with him not wanting to do it. He's a really funny actor. Shane wanted him to play the role, but then we had this new challenge of we needed to find a black penis in Pittsburgh. And it was I will credit Corey Musa, who's another producer on the movie, who took it on himself to say I'm gonna find you that.
Called every strip club.
He called every strip. Yeah,
every
absolutely.
Put
ads on Craigslist. I mean, he went on like
very resourceful.
Dating apps to try and find people who are willing to do it.
He changed his Tinder parameters to find it.
He ultimately was not able to. I'm spoiler alerting this for the show, but ultimately couldn't find it in Pittsburgh, and we found a
in LA in 2 seconds. Yeah.
I'm sure there's somebody in the audience here who.
But I mean it's a strange thing to be like, yeah, we're doing reshoots today for Shane's movie. What's it for? Oh, it's just the shot of the penis. I mean that was penis shot. So.
Were there any other casting issues? I mean, I guess just like finding.
Well, in Anna's movie, she had a hard time casting her lead of Scott. It's documented in the show. They went through a lot of actors, and it was like the lead of the movie, and they were a few days out of the movie, and they didn't have it, and ultimately she had to like Skype with actors in New York, which is it's hard to Skype through auditions, and because she couldn't find it in Pittsburgh,
right.
And ultimately she ended up casting him off like a phone interview, I believe, which is kind of, and he sent in an audition, but
that becomes a budgetary challenge because when you're doing a low budget movie, you can't really afford, particularly when it's a SAG movie, you can't really afford to fly in and house actors.
Yeah.
So you want to cast everybody, as many people as you can locally, and so when we sort of went through the local talent pool and she wasn't finding anybody for the role. And then you find someone out of New York. It's a hit on your budget more than just what you pay the actor. Even if the actor's willing to work for SAG minimum, it doesn't matter because you still have to house them, you still have to fly them in, and so it adds more. And we had those conversations where on both movies where you would literally you'd say, well, do you like this actor that much more because this is how much more they cost to fly them in, and that's not something on a studio movie, you don't bother, I remember being on a movie I shot in Boston where the director was flying in guys for one line from LA. And I'm like, do you realize like this is a first class plane ticket? I'm like, can you not find someone in Boston to do the line? And so it's like on a studio movie, like you don't care. But on a, you're on an indie movie, like that plane ticket is a lot.
Yeah.
Is a lot.
It can add up. I was talking to my hairdresser last week, and she said Nicole Kidman flew her out for a movie out of the country once, and it was first class. Mm-hmm. They flew her. It was $1,000 a day. She stayed in a first class hotel, like this, just to get her hair done once.
Josh is out with his trainer.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Every movie you do that, right? So yeah, I can. Do you have any specific stories about how you guys used your creativity to work within the budget?
I have to go back in time in my head. We shot these movies in January, February, and March, and it's been all post since then. And so the struggles that I think about in post, and there were budgetary struggles, but they're different, And so on Shane's movie, there, even though it's a comedy, there were 125 VFX shots, And originally we had. And I guess this maybe is an answer to your question, but originally we had a young, really talented VFX guy in Pittsburgh who's like, I can do this for, a very low amount of money. And I remember when that was presented to me, I'm like, all right, well, I mean, I guess, maybe that'll work, but at this point we don't really have a choice. And it didn't work. And we had to bring in more people, and so in that case, we actually had to raise a little bit more money just to finish the movie, and we had deadlines for the movie because the show was coming out, so the movie had to come out. So, if there was no show, that would have been a situation where the movie probably would have taken another, I think they estimated at one point, to finish the number of shots, because it wasn't like the guy was doing good work, it was just taking a long time. So I think the estimate at the time was like it was gonna be another like 9 months just to finish the VFX shots. And so, that was a situation where finding more money was able to sort of solve a time problem like that. But I mean, if there was no more money, then we would have.
Yeah, but there's also with time and creativity. Like, for instance, like our days were very tight, and we were trying to keep company moves to a minimum. And there was the day when we were shooting at Lamont, and there was like 2 extra hours that we didn't account for, that we kind of just got out of nowhere. We were done shooting, and we needed to wait until night. So we had like 2 hours until it was night, and it was dead time, and we had shooting for 20 days. We couldn't waste 2 hours of just sitting there. And so we figured out that there was a day 3 days later where we were supposed to be shooting at a location, like it was the exterior of like a sex shop. And so we're like, all right, we got 2 hours, let's go.
Was that for Shane's movie?
For Shane's movie.
Okay.
And so they found, of course.
Just
and so they
checking.
found like this like seedy building like around the corner. Let's steal a shot. There was no dialogue, so it was pretty easy, and we got the shot in 2 hours, and we made the most of those 2 hours of sunlight, and
that's
saved
fun.
us a lot of money.
I mean, that's fun when you can turn a bad situation.
It's a creative challenge. It's like, what are you gonna do with 2 hours?
You got to do something because you're burning money.
Yeah.
So,
That's always the most empowering thing to me, when I like come up against a wall and I'm like, I'm gonna get through this. I'm gonna find an answer, and you just do it. You just do it. Now, each of the directors chose to have a different title for the name of the movie versus the original title that you had for the script. How did they come up with the names of that, and how did that affect the?
Well, the title of the script is interesting. It started years ago. The original title was Turkey Drop, which is like this phrase that in the original script I had these like urban dictionary definitions. And what is Turkey Drop? And the idea is a dating couple in high school, they vow to stay together when they go to college. One of them comes home over Thanksgiving break and breaks up with the other. It's the Turkey Drop. Nobody understood the title. They didn't like it, so we got rid of that.
It sounded like a Disney movie about a slippery
we were like
turkey.
confused. Of like, okay, I thought it made sense. It didn't. And so then they're like, we need to come up with a new title. And so I was like trying to rack my brain, and I would look at all these other teen movies, and I was like, they're all songs. Can't Hardly Wait, Dazed and Confused, Superbad, James Brown, like they're all songs. And so American Pie. And so like I just started going through my iTunes and hit the Smiths, and I was like, oh, How Soon Is Now? Which was just perfect. And so I chose that. That was the original script that we sold it to MTV, and that Chris Moore, and we knew that we weren't gonna be able to pay Morrissey $1 million to have that title. So they knew that they had to change both titles, and it was up to both Shane and Anna. They both got to come up with their own titles, and Anna Hollidaysburg is a city outside Pittsburgh, and to her, it was a double meaning because Thanksgiving's a holiday, and it's the name of the town, and she just kind of fell in love with that title, and she kind of hit on that before we even started shooting, and we were a go with Hollidaysburg. With Shane, we didn't have a title. Like, we shot, like, the shooting title was Untitled Shane Dawson Comedy. We didn't have it, and it went down to this summer. We were still trying to come up with titles until, I mean, you were more involved with coming up with Not Cool than I was, so.
Don't credit me for that. I was against that title. I was like, don't name your movie something negative. But I think he really, he's a provocative guy and takes a lot of heat for the work that he does. And I think he kind of liked taking on a title that sort of had that negative connotation to it. And I think that to him, I think it sort of embodies thematically what the movie is about, which is, about this kid who was cool in high school who comes back home and is sort of not cool anymore, and sort of learning, like, what does it mean to be cool or not, and so it sort of, to him, it spoke to that. And I think that's what's again, gave them Final Cut. We also gave them the ability to choose their own title, and they both chose titles that spoke to them, and I think, I just think that's something neat about the chair, is that we were able to empower them so much in that way.
So each of the filmmakers got to choose their own crew for the movie. How did it work with the crews that were following them around, and were they kind of giving each other any guidance, or were they also first-time filmmakers in the documentary crews? And how much guidance did they get from the top?
Sure. I mean, look, the doc crew. Most of the people on the doc side were some of the most experienced people around, particularly the cameramen that really did an amazing job. And not only did they do an amazing job, and I think if you see the show, it's beautifully shot, but they did an amazing job of just being flies on the wall. That was their role. Their role was to not be seen, to not be heard. And so when you're on a film set and it's crowded and there's people and equipment and everything, like to do that is really hard. And so they never wanted anyone on the film side to really worry about them. It was, and the days began, we all got mic'd up, and then you just go. And so there wasn't really a lot of interaction. I'm sure there were times in their heads, and I know this, the guys on the dock side that would be shooting a shot of someone else shooting a shot, thinking, well, I would do that differently.
Yeah.
But that's just human nature, but that was never communicated. I mean, there was really a lot of professionalism in that way. And there was never a time where it was like, hey, dock guys, like, will you get this shot for us? Like, it just didn't work that way. We sort of created a wall in that sense. But the directors were very much allowed to bring in their own crews, and a lot of the crews came from Pittsburgh, and there's some crew that came from New York, and I think it's neat because God, I said neat again. Did I really do that?
You are so not cool.
Can we edit the neat out?
No way.
We're not going to.
You also said fuck like 3 times, so that kind of balances out.
But I was allowed to say that, right? Yeah. Is that the fuck gave me the cool credit because I said neat?
Yeah.
So okay, I get it.
You just took back your cool credit though, so.
By explaining that,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I lost my train of thought, so we'll just move on to the next question.
That was the last question before we get to audience questions.
Just nailed the last question.
It was really neat answer. So the audience has some questions. They want to know, did you notice a difference in approaches from each director? Shane is known as a YouTuber and Anna is an NYU film grad.
There were major differences between them. I think one of them is decisiveness, and not in a bad or good way. Shane is used to doing things quick and on the fly and on the cheap, and you kind of make a decision, you go with it, you shoot it, and you go. And Anna was a lot more pensive, and she would think about her shots, and she would consult the people that she was collaborating with, and it took a lot more time on set sometimes. And I think that style even translates to the movie and to the story. One's a quick, fast, kinetic movie, and the other one is more contemplative. So it's interesting.
How was Zachary Quinto involved in the filmmaking process?
So Zach and his company Before the Door, which is Zachary Quinto and Corey Musa and Neil Dodson, they came on board shortly after Dan and I did. They all actually met at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. Zach is from Pittsburgh. So there's definitely a connection, and they had roots in the city there. And they had made some really good independent films. They had made Margin Call, they made All Is Lost, and Chris was looking for some guys to come in and sort of be that Godfather role that not only had their roots to Pittsburgh, but also had made some indie movies. I mean, most of the movies that Chris and I had made prior to this were, all the movies we made prior to this were studio movies. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have that experience, and they were able to provide that, and you'll see them in the show as well. So
cool. This is a really interesting one. Do you feel the new generation of filmmakers, YouTubers, or web content creators, and traditional trained film students can learn from each other?
I would hope so. I think they both have things to offer each other. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, because YouTubers are. I mean, the playing field's leveled. I think people in film school are using the same cameras that people on YouTube are making, and they all have crews. They're just. Yeah. I think it's more of like a way into it.
I think there's a pretty clear distinction. I think that, and I do think they can learn from each other, because I think what people on YouTube have figured out how to do is communicate directly to an audience. They have a connection with audience that is far superior than most Hollywood stars, you know what I mean? And that's, their audiences actually feels like this, they're in their living room, they're on their phone, they're in bed with them, and so there's a real personal connection there. And so as content makers, that's really important. What the sort of the film school, and I'm more the film school guy. I went to film school at Northwestern, and but we geek out over making things look as perfect as they need to, and making sure that we know our film history, and I think that they could actually learn a little from each other, and I think because YouTube is sometimes I think a little too fast and a little too schlocky, and but they know how to talk to an audience, and I think sometimes people from the film school world can get not even think about the audience. Like, I know when I was in film school, like we were so worried about so many technical things, and and so much stuff that was, I think now I look back and I feel like it was so pretentious. Mm-hmm. We never sat around and said, why are we making this? Are we trying to entertain someone? Are we trying to make them laugh? Are we trying to make them cry? Like, what are we trying to do? Like, and
at
I think
no point in film school did somebody say to you, like, why are you doing this, or who is your audience, or any of that? You just were making it for
well,
you?
I mean, I'm being a little hyperbolic,
Yeah.
but I do think that focus on the audience isn't something that is really taught in film school. I think it's much more on the craft.
Interesting.
And I think that's what YouTubers, and listen, it's definitely taking off right now. But I think that is the skill that these guys have. Whether you think what they make is crap or not, and I think that's what most people that don't like it say that. They say, oh, it's just crap. But what you have to acknowledge is that they have audiences. So then you have to say, well, why? What is it that they're doing? What's that connection point? And I think that's something that could be learned.
I think film school though today is losing a bit of its pretension. Like they're always going to teach, film criticism and film theory, but they're not shooting on film anymore. And there's to see those just go out and make your own stuff, which is kind of the YouTube philosophy. So I don't know. I think they're kind of meeting somewhere in the middle these days.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that you started to hit on but didn't get to is not just that they're able to connect with the audience, but who is their audience? Who is logging in on their phone and subscribing and watching YouTube videos? And I'm sure that there's a demographic there. A lot of people watch cat videos, but yeah they are young.
No, right, no, and I think the cat video thing is very different. Like my aunt will watch the cat video, but she doesn't go and watch.
But does she subscribe to a certain YouTube content creator that
That's
she
like
goes
kids.
every week? Yeah,
it's like when I was young, like after school or whatever, I would go home and I would watch like reruns on TV or whatever. And I think kids now go home and go to their computers and have the channels that they watch on YouTube, and that's what they watch.
But this audience is going to grow up, and so for those of us out there that are making content, we need to sort of realize what are these. We were all sort of raised on different content, right?
Yeah.
But we have a whole generation of people now that are being raised on this YouTube content.
Yeah.
So
And will they be able to sustain to watch long-form narrative content, or do they only want the short?
It's really interesting questions. What was some specific idea that amazed you that each of the two filmmakers brought to their interpretation? I think this is good for Dan.
That amazed me.
Maybe because I know it was really hard for you to watch them, take your script and create their own interpretation. What was something that maybe one of the filmmakers or both the filmmakers did that you liked about their interpretation?
Well, I think with Shane's movie, there was a character in the original script called Joel, which I always loved. He was kind of like a nerdy, almost like Ducky from Pretty in Pink.
Did he say neat a lot?
He said neat all the time.
Thank you.
And Shane, had his heart set on this.
What? It's a runner.
Yeah, Shane had his heart set on this kid, Drew Monson, who was this YouTube talent who Shane kind of discovered. And this kid is
18.
18 years old. When he came into audition, he was just like shaking. It was really, it was funny, but and he was kind of nervous about casting, and Shane just believed in this kid. He really believed in him, and the kid was wacky and out there, and I think he knocked it out of the park. Like he took the role and he made it his own, and I think he's the breakout star comedically of the movie. Not that the other performances aren't great, but this actor is really fantastic, and that was Shane just believing in an actor and that he can really elevate the movie.
Was there anything that Anna brought to her interpretation that surprised you and pleased you?
Anna included her brother Phil in the movie, who is just also kind of comedically steals the movie. He's a character who was not in the original script, and so this was kind of, she had worked with Phil, her brother, Phil Kinosh, on some other movies and really wanted him to have a role in the movie, and she gave him a role, and like Drew, he knocked it out of the park, and he's something that people really just cling on to and relate to in this movie. He's just like a big teddy bear. He's fantastic.
This is a good one. Any memorable meltdowns that you can talk about?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one was, the day that I had to tell Shane that there were actors in town that had read his script and were turned off by the content and didn't want to be in it and didn't want to come audition for it, rather. And that was hard for him. I mean, that was definitely, he didn't understand. In his mind, he's like, but this isn't any raunchier than these other movies, and like American Pie or Superbad or something. And I think he really struggled for a minute for whether or not to censor himself. And I think he really said, do I cut this? Do I change that? Do I do? And I think it was an interesting moment. I mean, and you could make arguments both ways. as to whether or not he, maybe should have, and ultimately he didn't. And I certainly support an artist not censoring themselves. And I remember that day what I said to him was, if you're not going to do it, that's fine, but you have to understand what the consequences of that are going to be, which is that there will be locations that will read the script and say, we don't want you shooting that scene in here. And there will be actors that will say, I won't do that, and I think that's something that a filmmaker who is, is willing to push the boundaries like he is, that's something that they're going to deal with. And so you don't get to do material like that and then not understand why some people are not into it, and I think that was a lesson that he learned, and it definitely involved a freak out or whatever the question was along the way.
Well, he
meltdown.
Yes. Well, he kept the black penis in it, so I guess he made his decision.
He did.
Studios are often under pressure to keep budgets low. Do you feel the studios are adopting your indie film budget approach?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Paramount's got Insurge. I mean, but like indie films. I mean, it's interesting. A lot of the indie film divisions at the different studios have closed. So
they have the microfilm budget.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. But I mean, even like, I don't know. I don't think so. So no is I guess what the question the way I would answer the question. I mean, I think what they're realizing is they want to make, and this is what's been happening. I think post 2006 or 7, whatever writer's strike, 8, whatever it was. Studios make less movies, and they are really only wanting to make movies that have built-in awareness to them already. Because if they're going to gamble millions of dollars or something, they want to gamble it on something that has a little bit more, that already has some sort of built-in marketing to it. It's a product, whether it's a remake or whether it's a fucking board game or whatever it is, that people sort of know about. Because what gets hurt the most in that is the movies that I've always developed, which are original comedies. It's really, really hard to have a studio make an original comedy right now, and if
or human drama.
Yeah, I mean, and so no, I don't think they're taking that approach. I think they're making bigger bets on more sure, what they think are sure things, and willing to spend, they'd rather spend more money on the next X-Men than they would make an original action movie. And I understand that from a corporate standpoint.
But you've had a really interesting career in that all the movies that you've produced have had first-time writers that have stuck with the film throughout the entire production.
Yeah.
That's really unique. Do you have a kind of say on why you feel it's important for movies like that to be made?
Well, I mean, look, I started off, my first sort of job in Hollywood was working for a writer, and it was working for a guy named Adam Hers who created the American Pie movies. And so I became loyal to him first. And I realized that movies start with a writer in a room, often by themselves, trying to figure out what to tell a story about. And that's, they're the first storyteller on it. Everyone becomes a part of the storytelling process, but they're the first ones. And so I guess sort of inherently became really protective of writers. And so when I was lucky enough to actually develop some scripts that got made, I became very protective of the writers. And with studios, I remember having the conversations, because you always have the conversation, well, maybe we should bring someone else, to get it there. This isn't working, let's bring in someone else. I mean, that's just a phrase you hear all the time. Yeah. And in each of those instances, and I haven't made a ton of movies, but I was lucky enough in each of those instances that I was able to say, or another producer involved, or someone was able to say, a director, let's just give the writer one more chance. And they were able to come through. So that's rare. I mean, I think it's a cool thing for me, certainly, to say to other writers that I want to work with, like, hey, I've been able to, make movies where I've been able to protect the writers and keep an original writer on from start to finish. And that certainly has happened. But I definitely think that it's not the norm. And I'm not saying that there aren't instances when a writer shouldn't be involved.
And as a writer, you can't expect that that's going to be the norm. You know? It's just sometimes you're going to get fired. It's going to happen.
And it happens.
Sometimes you want to get fired.
No, what?
I said sometimes you want to get fired. Sometimes no. I mean, it's true. Sometimes your job is sometimes you birthed the baby and you've raised it and you've taken it to the point where it needs to go. It needs to go with someone else.
They can fire you and bring you back too.
That's happened
as well. Yeah. Well, I know this is a breakout script for you, and you've had a really interesting career in the last, probably 10 years you've been. I don't want to put an age on you.
That works.
What are some of the most impactful lessons that you guys have learned over the last few years that you wish you could have told your younger self when you were starting out in the industry?
I would say just to have patience. It takes a long time to get a movie made. That's what happened with this. It started 2009 when I first told Josh about my idea. Sold it 2011, tried to get it made for a couple of years. Chris Moore comes along. Here it is, 2014, and they finally came out today. And it takes time. You don't write a movie and sell it and get it made overnight. It doesn't happen. Right. And if you want a career as a writer, you have to be patient and expect to be in it for the long haul.
And for you?
You know, I'm gonna steal this from Chris Moore because it's something I've thought a lot about, but I'll give him credit for it because he said it first, which is realizing that we're all salesmen. You have to be. If you're a writer, you're a salesman. You got to get in a room and sell your ideas to people. And if you're a director and you made your movie, you got to go out there and sell it. You got to know how to, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's doing an interview. I mean, we're all salesmen. And I think that element, like we want to think that it's like, no, we're just creative people and we can sit in this creative little bubble that's safe and just make stuff. But making stuff isn't where it ends. You also have to go out and get it to an audience. And I think that realizing from an early age that part of being a content creator is also being a salesman.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for all the insight that you guys have shared with us today. And I'm really excited and looking forward to seeing the show. Are you guys? Yeah, so we'll check that out. And so let's give a warm round of applause for our guests. Thank you guys. Thank you for your applause. And thank you for checking out the show. We hope that you're inspired by what Dan and Josh shared with us today. And we hope that you'll keep tuning in. If you want to see more, just subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's HWMM Originals and our iTunes podcast, How We Make Movies. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.